So welcome everyone to this channel named Geeks for Geeks, and today we guys are going to develop this beautiful survey form using the basic HTML and CSS codes. Okay, so let's dive into this code.org platform and check out how can we make use of some basic HTML and CSS coding for developing that beautiful survey form I just showed you. So this is the one which we are going to develop today. So before that we need to access the Weblab. So what we can do, we can come on this code.org platform, and here we are required to enter a login credentials so that we can access our dashboard. Okay, done with entering the required login credentials. Okay, it is again not accepting. Let me try this one. I think this ID is going to work for me. Yes, so once you are there on your dashboard, you can come over here right on the top and hit this create button. So this is a cascading menu you're going to come across. Now you can hit this view all projects, and it is going to redirect you on one of the beautiful pages of code.org. Come down and hit this view full list option, and then you can visit this Weblab. So this is the Weblab environment you are going to see on your desktop when you will hit that Weblab option. Okay, now it is divided into three different parts, as you all know. So here we are going to define all the required HTML codes, and on this sheet we are going to define all the required CSS codes. Fine, and as you very well know about this thing, that this code over here is actually for linking this HTML document to this CSS style sheet. Okay, fine. Now let's go on that original form which we are going to develop today. So this is the one. Now let's define the code for this first thing. So it's a text which says Geeks for Geeks survey form. Now how can we get this type of thing over here on the stage area? So what we can do, we can make use of simple header tags. Let's make use of h1 tags, and let's write down Geeks for Geeks. Okay, we can type it also, or else if you want you can just copy it from here and we can paste it like this. Okay, and then we need to close the h1 tag because it is a container tag, right? Fine, so we are able to see the required text over here on this stage area. Now because it is a form that we are developing, that we are designing, so we need to enclose everything inside the form tags. So form, and here I am defining the ending part of this form. Now in between these form tags I am going to define all the required codes which are going to help us in getting these input boxes and these label box and all the components which we are able to see right now present on this form, right now getting reflected on this form. So the first thing that we are able to see is this label box and this input box, and they are present right on the top. And this label box is saying that enter your name. So we need to connect this label box to this input box. Now how can we define the code for these two components? That's what we are going to check out. So what we can do, we can make use of the division section. So I'm going to define a separate division for these two components. Okay, let's close this division section. Now inside this, the first component that we have over here is this label box. Now what is the tag that we can use for define label box? We can make use of label, simple. Okay, and let's close it over here, and in between these label boxes, label tags, sorry, I am going to put this name thing. Okay, now besides this label box, I would like to define the code for this input box also. So how can we get an input box over here on the stage area? So the best way is to make use of input tag, right? And then we can write down type. So because we want to have a text type of input box, so that is the reason I am passing this value text for this type attribute. Okay, now as you can see in the inside this input box, we are able to see this enter your name thing written, right? It is getting reflected inside this input box. Now how can we get this kind of thing inside our input box? So there is a property that you can make use of, and the name of that property is placeholder. Now inside this you can write down enter your name, and when you will close this input box, so that's what you are going to see over here on the stage area. So right now this label box is also visible to us over here. It is also getting reflected right on the top over here, and this input box also is getting reflected over here. So it's a text type of input box. You can write down whatever you want to inside this input box. Okay, hope this much code is very much clear to you guys. Right, now if you want to connect this label box to this input box, the best way is to make use of this name property, and let's define a value for this name. So I would like to define name only for this name attribute. Now for connecting this input box to this label box, we can here make use of this attribute for, and whatever I have passed the value for this name property over here, I need to pass the same value for this for property also. So that's how you can connect this label box with this input box over here. Right, so we are done with defining the required HTML code for these two components. Now let's define a class also for this division section. So I would like to define a class with name, let's say form control. Okay, now as you can see, the appearance of these two components and these two components, then these two components, they are very much similar. So what we can do, we can copy this whole division tag. Now in order to define the required HTML code for these two components, we just have to paste the copied code like this first. Okay, now let's make the required changes over here in this coding section. Now we have this label which is saying email, so we can replace this name with email first like this. Okay, and then we have this enter your email in the placeholder field of this input box. So let's define enter your email over here. Okay, now if you want to connect this input box to this label box, you can just replace, let me just enlarge the size of this window so that the code can be more visible to you guys. Yeah, now I think it is looking good. So in order to connect this label box with this input box, we can change the value over here. So I would like to use this value email. Okay, and as you can see, now the email and input box are visible to us over here on the stage area. Right, so it's very simple. You just have to copy this code and put it over here and make the required changes, and you will get to see the required output getting reflected on this stage area over here. Right, now let's come on this third thing, which is for age. So we need to repeat the same steps again. Let's copy this whole thing and place it over here. And I'm not changing the name of the class, remember this thing. So for all these divisions we have the same class name. Okay, now let's replace this with age, and here also I'm going to define age. Okay, now what do we have inside this placeholder field? It is enter your age, right? So we need to replace this email with age, and we will be able to see the required output over here on this stage area, right? So we are done with defining the code for 6 components, 3 label boxes and 3 input boxes. Okay, now let's define the code for this, which option best describes you, this label box, and then there is a drop down which is connected to this label box. Now what all HTML codes do we have to write down over here for getting this label box and this drop down over here on the stage area? That's what we are going to check out now. So what you can do, we can copy this thing and place it over here. Just a second, I think the code was not. Okay, now it is getting reflected over here. The copied code, the class is going to remain the same, form control only. Now in this label box we have to reflect this thing, which option best describes you. So I am copying it from here and I am placing it in place of this age. Okay, so as you can see, the text is now getting reflected over here. Fine. Now I am going to define the required code for getting this drop down reflected on the stage area. So we need to eliminate this input thing from here, and now we can make use of this tag named select for getting this drop down over here on the stage area. Okay, select, and then if you want to connect this drop down with this label box, then we can make use of this value role, and you just have to pass this value for this name attribute of this select tag. Right, now inside this select tag I am going to define some options. So what all options do we have over here in this drop down? So the first option is student, then intern, then professional, then other. Okay, let's come back, and here we can make use of this tag option for defining the various options in the drop down. Now I'm going to make use of this value attribute. So the first value is student, and whatever you want to get reflected as an option in the drop down, you have to write it down over here in between these two option tags. So the first value is student, right? So let's write down student over here. So as you can see, now the drop down is visible to us over here on the stage area, and the student is also getting reflected over here by default. Let's now copy this whole thing and paste it over here. I'm replacing this with intern because the second thing is intern that that is visible to us over here in this option section of the drop down. Right, let's now repeat the same step. Third value is professional. So let's replace the value first, professional, and here I am going to write down professional again. Okay, now let's paste the option tag again, and the fourth value is other. So we need to write down other over here, and here also we have to replace the student with other. Now let's set this drop down and see whether we will be able to see all the 4 options getting reflected in this drop down or not. So we are able to see all the 4 options getting reflected over here. Okay, so that's how with the help of this select tag you can define a drop down for your form, and with the help of this option tag you can define the various options that you want to see in the option section of this drop down. Okay, just remember this code, make a note of it. Right, let's now come down. So again we have a label box, and for this question we have three different options. So these are three different radio buttons which are present over here, and next to these radio buttons we have some text also getting reflected on this form. Now how can we get this kind of output? That's what we have to think and code now. So let's do that. I am copying this division again and I am placing it over here. Right, the class, I'm not going to change the class. The label is saying, would you recommend Geeks for Geeks to a friend? Of course, it is a very good website. It is a very good platform on which people can learn different computer related things in a simple way. So that's why definitely I would recommend this platform to my friends. So how can we get this text reflected over here on the stage area? We just have to replace this age with the copy text, and as you can see the whole text is visible to us over here. Okay, now we need to eliminate every other thing which is present over here. So we don't require that for attribute anymore. Okay, so I'm done with defining the required HTML code for this label box. Now the next thing that I have to do is I have to define three checkboxes, and with each checkbox there is a text also which is getting reflected next to it. How can we do that? How can we do this? Now for doing this, what we can do, we can make use of two tags. One is the label tag which we can make use of for getting this text reflected over here, and one is the input tag with which we can get this radio button on this stage area. Let me tell you now about that code practically. So I am defining a label first, okay, and then inside these label boxes or these label tags I am going to define this input tag. Okay, I'm defining this input tag. Now inside this input tag, the type that I would like to define is radio. So this is the one, right? After defining the type, you can close the input box, and then you can write down the text which is getting reflected over here. So the first text is yes, so I'm writing down yes over here, and then yeah, that's how you can get the required output over here. So as you can see, the radio button is visible to us, and this text is also visible to us over here on the stage area. Let's now copy this whole thing and I am placing it over here. So the next radio button is for no. So let's replace it with no. Okay, and then we can copy this whole thing and place it over here. The third one is for maybe. Okay, so as you can see, all the three radio buttons are now visible to us. But right now what is happening, we are able to select all the radio buttons. Unlike what is happening over here, we are able to select only one radio button at a time. So that's what we would like to do over here also. We would like the user to select only one of these three options available over here. So how can we make it happen? So what we can do, we can define ID, some ID for all these input boxes. So let's define an ID with name, let's say R1. Okay, and here I am defining ID as R2, and okay, for this one, for the first one I am defining the ID as R1, for the second one I am defining R2, and for the third one I am defining R3. Okay, let's now define a name also for all these three radio buttons. So name is going to be, let's say, rad. Same name you have to define for this input box also, and same name you have to define for this radio button also. Now let's see what is the output we are going to get. So now, as you can see, we are able to select only one of these radio buttons at a time, right? Why it is happening? Just because the names of all these radio buttons are same, which means that all these radio buttons belongs to the same category, right? So you will not be able to select all the three now. Okay, you will be able to select only one out of these three, right? So we are done with defining the required HTML code for this section also. Now let's come on this part. So we have a label box, a label which is reflecting this thing, and then we have some check boxes over here, and next to every checkbox we have some text also, which is visible to us, getting reflected on this form over here. So how can we get this kind of view? That's what we have to think and code now. So the best way is to make use of this code. First of all, let's define a division section, and I would like to have the same class which we have defined for all the division sections we have defined till now on this HTML document. So it is going to be form control. Let's close this division section. Okay, now inside this division section we can define a label first. So what is going to be the label? That's what we have to think and code. So let's make use of this code over here, and I am pasting it inside this division. What is the text I would like to get reflected over here? So this is the text. I am copying it from here and I am placing it over here in place of this text. Okay, now as you can see, this languages and frameworks known. So this text is pretty big as in comparison to this one. So how can we make this part of this text appear small in size? So what we can do, we can enclose this part in between small tags. So now this is what you will get to see as an output on this stage area. Okay, so you can make use of this small tag. Now let's define the code for this part. So we have a checkbox, and next to this checkbox we have some text also. So what we can do, we can copy this code from here and we can place it over here just below this code we have defined inside this label box. Okay, and now for this label box, for this input, because we would like to have a checkbox for this text, right? So in place of this radio we can write down checkbox. This is the value that you have to pass if you want to see a checkbox component on the stage area. Okay, and now we guys can eliminate this thing, and we need to eliminate this name part also. We don't require it anymore. Okay, if you want, you can definitely do it. Let's make it check. Okay, and the first next to this first checkbox, the text which is getting reflected over here is C. Fine, so we need to replace this maybe with C. Okay, now as you can see, the required output is visible to us over here on the stage area. Let's now copy this whole thing, and I am going to paste it over here. Now what we have to do, we just have to replace this C with C++. Okay, then we again have to copy this whole thing and place it just below this label box. Now the next text is C#. We can copy it from there and paste it over here. Okay, let's copy this whole thing and paste it over here. So now the next checkbox is for Java. Hope you guys are enjoying this lecture. Do not forget to share the video in your group or groups so that more and more students can come and join the channel and enjoy these free coding classes Geeks for Geeks is providing to you guys on this channel, Geeks for Geeks School. And thank you very much in advance for supporting the channel. So we have to repeat now the same steps for all these remaining texts. So the next thing is JavaScript. Let's copy it from here and paste it here. Okay, now the next is for React. Okay, let's copy it again and I'm pasting it over here. So next thing is Angular. Okay, so everything is going perfectly fine right now. Next thing is Django. And then we have this Spring, right? Okay, we can copy it from here and paste it over here. So now we have all the required components which we are able to see over here in this section getting reflected on the stage area. Fine, so we are done with defining the required HTML code for this part of this form. Now let's come on this part. So now in this part we have a label box again, which is reflecting this text, any comments or suggestions, and then we have a text area. So let's define the required HTML code for this part now. So again I am going to do the same thing. Let's define a division section, and class name, we are going to have the same class name, which is form control. So I'm going to copy this and paste it over here in between these two double inverted commas. Let's close the division section now. Okay, now inside this division section, let's define a label. So the name, the thing which we would like to get reflected inside the label box is this, any comments or suggestions. This is the text, and let's now close the label box because it is a container tag. That's why we have to make sure that we have closed it also. Now inside this division tag, just below this label box, we are going to define the code for this text area also. How can we get a text area on this stage over here? So we can make use of this text area tag, and let's now define something in the placeholder field. So we can have something like, you can mention your comments here. Fine, now when you will close the text area, so this is what you are going to see over here. So now we are able to see this label box also and this text area also getting reflected on the stage area. But this one is pretty better as in comparison to this one, because we don't have anything in the placeholder field of this text area. Okay, now let's define the required code for the button which is getting reflected right in the bottom. So what we can do, we can simply write down this button, and because it is a submit type of button, so we can pass this value submit for this button attribute, sorry, button tag, and then we can pass a value also, let's say submit for this value attribute of button. Okay, now because button is again a container element, so we need to define the closing tag also for button. So now a button is also visible to us over here on the stage area. Fine, so we are done with defining all the required HTML code for getting all these components which we are able to see on this form over here on the stage area. Now the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to style our form. So for that we will be needing some CSS touch. We need to give some CSS touch to this HTML code we have defined over here. So let's move to this CSS file and define the required code. I am eliminating whatever was there inside this file by default. Okay, let's now style the body first. So I would like to have a background color of, we have a background color which is getting reflected just below this form. So in order to get the color code for this color, we can make use of the color picker tool, which you can easily find in the game lab of code.org. So let's visit the game lab and make use of that color picker tool for finding out the color code of this background color which we are able to see in the background of this form. So we just have to take a snapshot of this. How can we do that? Hit the print screen button you have on your computer. Okay, you have on your keyboard. Then you can come on this animation library, and then you can hit this new animation tab. Automatically you're going to come across this beautiful page. Then you can hit this draw your own option. You are going to land on an empty frame. Now here you can paste that screenshot which you have just taken. How can you do that? You just have to press Ctrl and V together, and automatically you will get to see the screenshot getting reflected in a small window like this. Now let's hit this next button to paste that screenshot. So this is a screenshot. Now we can select this color picker tool and let's check out the color code of this color. So let's select this color, and as you can see the color over here has changed, and this is the code of this green color which is getting reflected over here. Now I'm going to make use of this code. Let's paste it over here like this. As you can see, the background of this page has changed now to the same color which is getting reflected over here on this original form. Right, so that's how you can change the color. Let's now play with this font family also. So I would like to have this font family Verdana. As far as I think, this is Verdana only which is visible to us over here. Yes, it is Verdana. Okay, if you want you can make use of some other font family, so it is totally your call. Okay, now as you can see everything is getting reflected right in the center. So how can you bring everything in the center? You can make use of the text align property, and then you can pass this value center. So everything is now going to come in the center of this body. Okay, let's now customize the view of the form. So we can access the form using this selector. Okay, now inside this let's first check out how can we change the background color of the form. So we can make use of this background color property, right? So as you can see, it is of white color. Now the color code of white color is, you can write down 3 times F. So as you can see, now the form is getting reflected in white color and the background is still green. Okay, let's now define a width for this form. So for that, I'm going to make use of this maximum width attribute, and let's have a maximum width of 500 pixels. Okay, let's now define a margin also for this. So let's have a margin of 50 pixels auto. Okay, then because as you can see, there is some gap in between this content and these borders of the form. So how can you define this space in between this content and these borders of the form? So the best way is to make use of the padding attribute. Absolutely correct. Okay, 30 pixels, 20 pixels. Now when you'll refresh this form, you will be able to see the changes. You will get to see the changes getting reflected over here on the stage area. Right. Now let's define some shadow for the box over here. Right. So let's pass the values for this box shadow. So 2 pixel on the top, then 5 pixel on the right side, 10 pixel on the in the bottom, and let's pass some color also. So 0, 0, 0, 0.5 is the opacity. Fine. So this is what you will get to see as an output. Now this shadow is visible to us, getting reflected in the bottom of this form. So this shadow is coming from this code that we have defined over here. Okay, box shadow is the attribute that you can make use of for getting this kind of shadow, right, below this form. If you will change it to 30, so as you can see, the shadow is now changed. It has now become more wider in size. Okay, so for now I'm going to keep it 2 pixels only. So I'm done with defining the required code for customizing the view of the form. Now let's go back on this HTML document, and here, as you very well know, that for all these division sections that we have defined over here on this HTML document, the name of the class we have for all these divisions is form control. So let's now access that class. So we can put a dot, and after that we can write down the name of the class like this. So this is a syntax that you have to keep in mind when you are accessing a class on the CSS sheet. So first of all, you have to place a dot, and after that you have to write down the name of the class. Okay, now I would like to align the text. Okay, I would like to align the text in the left side. Why? As you can see, everything is aligned in the left side over here. So that's the reason I have passed left as a value for this text align property. And then we can have some margin in the bottom. So margin bottom, let's pass this value 25 pixels. So as you can see, the form is now coming in the required shape. It is okay. So we are done with customizing the view of this class named form control. Now we are going to check how can we play with the appearance of this input box and this drop down over here. So the best way of accessing all these components in one go is by accessing these components with the help of this class. Now how can you access all these components with the help of this code, with the help of this class in one go. So what you have to do, you have to write down the name of the class first, okay, and then you can make use of the tags you have used for getting these components over here on the stage area. So for these three components we made use of input tag, right? Then for the for the for this drop down we made use of select, right? Then you can place a comma, and then for this text area over here we made use of text area tag, right? So that's how you can access all these components in one go. Now whatever properties and whatever code you're going to write down here inside these curly brackets, it will be applicable on all these components. Remember this thing. So the first thing that I am defining is the border for all the components. So I would like to have a border of 1 pixel, and it should be a solid border. Okay, now what is the color of this border? So it is black, right? So we can make use of this code hash 777, 3 times 7 you have to you can use. Okay, then we can, so as you can see, it is not pointed, the borders are not pointed, right? They are somewhat round in shape. So how can you get these round borders? So we can make use of border radius property. Okay, and let's pass a small value for this. So I would like to pass this 2 pixels, and as you can see, now the borders are round in shape. They are not pointed, they are round in shape. Okay, now if you will make it 12, so that's what you will get to see as an output. But we don't want to see this kind of input box, right? Let's make it 3 pixels. I think 3 is fine. Yeah, 3 is perfectly fine. Then we can make use of font family, and this time I am going to make use of this inherit value for this font family. Now let's define something for the padding part also. Now because as you can see, there is a gap in between this placeholder value and these border of the components. In all the components you will be able to see this thing, and it is happening just because of this padding. So I would like to define a padding of 10 pixels, and then when you will refresh this stage area you will be able to see the changes over here, right? So now there is a gap in between this enter your name and the border of this input box in which it is getting reflected. So it's because of this padding that we have defined over here. Right, now what kind of display you would like to have? So because it is a table, because we would like to stack these components on each other, so that is the reason we can make use of this block value. So now that's how you are going to get the final result. So now they are stacked onto each other. This label box is present right on the top of this input box. Then again this email component is going to go right on the top of this input box. If you will remove it from here, so that's what you will get to see. But because we have made use of this block property, so it is going to stack these components on each other. Let's now define a width also for all the components. I would like to have a width of 95%. I think 95% will do. Yes, it is looking perfectly fine. So we are done with styling the input box, select this drop down and the text area. Now let's customize the view of the radio buttons and the checkbox buttons. So how can we do that? We can make use of the same code we have defined over here. So I am copying these 2 lines of code from here and I'm putting it over here. Now in order to access the radio buttons and the checkboxes, so you can make use of this input selector. And what was the type that we passed for the input tag for getting the radio buttons reflected on the stage area, so it was a radio, right, that we made use of. Let's copy this whole thing and paste it over here, and here I am going to make use of a comma, a separator, and here let's replace this radio with checkbox. Okay, now let's customize the view of this radio and checkbox. So for that we can define the required code in between these, inside this these curly brackets. So the first thing that I would like to do is I would like to set the display of these components to inline block. Okay, now this is what you will get to see as an output. Now earlier when this display was not there, so that's what that's how they were visible to us over here. Okay, now width should be I would like them to automatically adjust the width, so that is the reason I am passing this auto as a value for this width property. Okay, let's now define the code for customizing the view of this button which is getting reflected over here. So how can we do that? We can make use of this button. Okay, and then the first thing I would like to define is the background color for this button. So I would like to have a background color of, now what is the color of this button? So it is, I think, very much same to the color of this body section. So we can copy the color code from here and let's pass the same color code for the background color of the button. Fine. Now let's define a border for this button. So we are going to have a 1 pixel solid border, and it is going to be of this color 777, right? Okay, now let's define a border radius for this button. So I would like to have a border radius of 3 pixels. Okay, let's refresh this stage area. Fine. Now what else can we do? We can make use of this font family thing, and let's make use of this value inherit. Okay, now we guys can enlarge the font size also. What is getting reflected inside this button? Submit is getting reflected. So let's do one thing. Let's write down something in between these two button tags. So I would like to see submit getting reflected on the top of the button. So that's how the text will be visible to you guys now on the head of this button. Okay, let's now play with the values of this button. So we are done with passing a value for this font family. Now let's pass something for the text size, because the size of the text which is getting reflected over here, it is somewhat big as in comparison to the one which is getting reflected over here right now inside this button. So let's make use of a value somewhere near to 20. Let's pass 21 pixels. Okay, I think this is perfectly fine. Now I would like to have a block kind of display for this button. Done with this. Let's define a width also for this button. So I would like to have a width of 100% for this button. Okay, let's refresh this form and see, it is now 100%. Okay, let's now define some margin on the top of this button. So I would like to have a margin of 50 pixel on the top, and then we can define some margin in the bottom also. So I would like to have a bottom margin of 20 pixel, let's say, for this button. So now this is what we are going to see as an output. Okay, so we are done with defining all the required codes for all these components. Now we have to set the view in such a way that we can make this form appear in the same way, the way this original form is getting reflected over here. Now how can we do that? That's what we have to think and define the code for. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So we are done with defining the required code for this body section. Okay, this is perfectly fine. We are done with defining the required code for this form section also. Okay, and then we are done with defining the required code for this class form control. Okay, then we define the code for, okay, so we haven't defined the code for these label boxes, right? We haven't customized these label boxes yet. Now how can we access these label boxes? So using the same class font dash control, we can access the label boxes also. Okay, now I would like to define a block kind of display first for these label boxes over here, so that they can come on each other, so that I can stack them on each other. Now there is a gap over here in between this label box and this text input box over here. How can we define a code for getting this kind of space over here in between this label box and this input box? So yes, of course we can make use of margin bottom. We can have some margin in the bottom for this label box, right? So let's have a margin space of 25 pixel. So now when you'll refresh this code, okay, so the output is not visible to us. Now why is it happening? That's what we have to check out. So text align display, it is blocked, this is perfectly fine. And then margin bottom is, if I'll make it 10 pixels, okay, again we are not able to, you're not able to see any kind of space in between this label box and this input box, right? If I'll eliminate this display over here, let's see what is going to happen. Okay, just a second, let me go back on this HTML code, and we have these label boxes inside this form control named class. Okay, so this is working, this is perfectly fine. Now why we are not able to, why this code over here is not working, that's what we have to see. No problem. Okay, no problem. Let's okay, so we are done with defining the required code for this class. Then we are done with defining the code for these label boxes. Then we are also done with defining the required code for this input box, this select, and this text area over here. Okay, font family, border, then border radius, padding, display, and then width. All the 6 things we are done with defining. Then we have defined the code for this radio button and checkbox, and then this is inline block and auto. So why we are not able to see the required output? That's what we're not able to see these checkboxes getting reflected like the way they are getting reflected over here on this what we call it, form. Why is it so? That's what we have to now see. So it is inline block, then it is auto, this is perfectly fine. Okay, let's go back on this HTML code, and here in the bottom, so this is the division tag. Okay, we have defined for this text area over here, and in between these division tags we have all the label boxes and also the check boxes, right? Do we have the check boxes also? Yes, we have the check boxes also. Now we have to think and check why we are not able to see them getting reflected like the way they are getting reflected over here. Okay, so let's do one thing. If I will name checkbox, this is perfectly fine, this is also perfectly fine. Okay, then names of all the checkboxes are same, right? Check is the name which I have passed for this name property of all these checkboxes. So that is perfectly fine, and we have closed this label box also here. Yes, it is perfectly fine. Why we are not able to see them in the way they are getting reflected over here? That's what we have to find out. So division, they are inside. Okay, then this name is perfectly fine, type is checkbox only. Now if I will go back on the style.css, let's remove this display from here. So this is how we are, these are getting reflected over here. So if I'll pass some other value for this display, okay, because I want to see them inline, that is the reason I pass that inline block. No, this is not going to give us the right output. Inline block, why we are not able to get the required output with the help of this inline block thing? Okay, so we are able to see them getting reflected like this, right? And input box type is radio, type is checkbox over here, this is perfectly fine. If I will remove, no, let's pass something for this float. So I would like to see them floating in the left side. Okay, and then we can make use of this display, and let's pass inline block. So now this is what we are getting as an output. So there is some issue in this code, right? That's why we are not able to see the correct output. No problem, let's check it out one more time. So this code is working perfectly fine, the form code is working perfectly fine. If I will increase the text align, so this is for the form control, the class part. Let's eliminate this thing from here. No, this is not going to give us the correct output. Margin bottom, font control, then it is label. Okay, display is for these label boxes is of block type, and if I will remove it from here, what is going to happen? Okay, margin bottom is 10 pixels. Then if I will pass some margin top over here of 10 pixels, let's say, yes, now I am able to see some gap getting reflected in between these two things. So let's make use of this margin top in place of this margin bottom, instead of making use of this margin bottom. So this is also going to define, this is also a way you can define a space in between this label box and this input box over here. So we are able to see now a gap in between all these label boxes and the input boxes. Alright, now the only thing that we are left with is the view of this part. We would like to get a view like this. Okay, no problem, we will get it very soon. Let's identify the error in the code. So it is this is the code which we have actually, which is actually customizing the view of this part. So if I will remove this float from here, this is what you will get to see as an output. Fine. And then width is auto. Let's eliminate this thing. Okay, so now it is perfectly fine, but these input boxes, these radio buttons should come on the right side, sorry, left side, and these these labels over here should come next to these radio buttons, right? That's the only thing we have to now define the code for. So what should be the value for the width that we can pass? Let's pass inherit. Let's see what is the output we are going to get with this thing. Okay, so we are able to see this kind of output getting reflected over here, but we don't want to see them like this, right? How about if I'll pass some 200 pixel value? Okay, let's make it 300 pixels. Okay, and if I'll make it 500 pixels, no, 500 is not a good value. 250. Okay, so now they are, we are able to see them getting reflected like this over here. Fine. And now if I will use this float in order to make them float on the left side of the form, will we be able to do it or not? Let's check it out. No, we are not able to get the required output. So right now they are getting reflected in the center, right? And over here in this form, they are on the left side of this form. Now we have to bring them to the left side. What is the thing that we are missing? That's what we have to find out. There is only one thing that we are missing. And if I will make it auto, if I'll pass this auto, so again this is not going to give us the correct output, right? But auto is the value which we which we should pass for getting this kind of output, because we have already passed this text align property, this left value for this text align property for this form control class, and whatever is going to get reflected in the body, it is going to come in the center. Fine, so that is the reason this width over here is not working. Just a second, let me check out the code of this original form. No problem. Okay, now what we can do, so this is the original form, this is the original code, and let's check what is the thing that we are missing, because of which we are not able to get these things in the left side of this form. Right now they are getting reflected on in the center. If I'll pass this 250 pixel, they are going to come in the center, right? Okay, so this is the whole thing. Fine. No, this is not going to give us the correct output. So this is a code which we have made use of for the division section, for this division section and for this division section. Alright, so let's do one thing. Let's copy it from here. It's almost the same thing that I have defined over here, right? Now if I will paste it in place of this whole thing. Let's see whether we'll be able to get the required output with the same CSS code which we have defined in the CSS file for these two sections. No, I think this is not going to help us. Now what is the thing that we are missing? What is the thing that we are missing? This is perfectly fine. This is perfectly fine. Okay, then name is there for all the, we have defined name also for all the checkboxes, right? Okay. I think the only thing that we missed was we didn't connected these labels, right? We didn't connected these labels over here with these input boxes, the way they are connected over here. Okay, with this, with every label box, I have made use of this for attribute, right? For connecting this label box with this input checkbox, and with this radio button also, I have made use of this for keyword and this name keyword for connecting this label box with this input box. Let's do that quickly, no problem. We'll be able to resolve the issue very soon. So let's come down, and over here for this, just a second. So we have to change the code from this yes thing, right? Yes. So let's come here, and for this label box, I'm going to have this for class with name. Okay, so the name is going to be the same. Fine. But why it will help us, right? Why it will help us? Because the for type is this for these fors, and for the for type is for these label boxes for which we have defined for the radio buttons. The for type over here on this original form is this. Okay, so why it is going to help us? Let's do one thing. Let's copy this thing, and I'm placing it over here in place of this code. Okay. Now if I will define this width auto, this is perfectly fine. Again, it is not coming, it is not going in the next line. Until and unless I'll make it 225 pixels, it is not going to come in the next line. So this is what we are facing the issue with right now. So the output which we are getting right now, it is like this, right? So everything of this section is getting reflected in the center. How can we get the required output? That's what we have to find out. Okay, so I think now we have resolved the issue. Now everything over here is coming in the original form. Let me just close this window, and this is the original form. Just a second. What was we getting originally? The form was like this. Originally the form was like this. Okay, and we are getting the same output right now over here. Now just because we haven't defined, I think we were missing something over. Okay, so I think we were missing something in this form section. That is the reason we were not able to get these things reflected in the center. Rest everything is perfectly fine. Okay, so for this font family also, I think we haven't defined the correct value, or have we defined the correct value? Yes, we did define the correct value. Absolutely right. We defined Vardhana only. Okay. So this is how you can get the desired output. Okay, now we are able to see a perfect form, and it is looking extremely appealing. Let's see how it will look when we will run it on a bigger window. So this is how this is how the form is going to look like when you will open it in a bigger window. Okay, now the kind of problem we came across while designing this form. You may come across such kind of problems. So if you ever come across such kind of problems, the best way is to check out these values that you have passed for these attributes over here. Okay, it may be possible that I might haven't made use of a correct value for one of these properties. So that is the reason everything over here was getting reflected in in the center. So in order to get the correct output, you have to again, you can check the values again, whatever values you have passed, for whatever attributes you have made use of, and then you can rectify the errors so as to get the desired result. Hope you guys enjoyed this lecture a lot. Do like and share this video in your group so that more and more students can come and join the channel, enjoy these free coding classes we guys are giving on this beautiful channel named Geeks for Geeks. Thank you very much for joining me in this lecture.